Okay, picture this. You're at the United Nations and a world leader is giving a speech. You have to listen, understand, and translate every single word they're saying into another language live for a huge audience. The mental pressure is just insane. So how on earth do professional interpreters handle that without their brains just shutting down?
You know that feeling, right? That totally frustrating moment where your brain just hits a wall? The word is right there on the tip of your tongue, but you can't quite get it. Well, for a professional interpreter, that moment isn't just awkward. It could be a disaster, disrupting critical communication. So, what's their secret? Well, it all comes down to this incredible four-part mental juggling act they have to perform constantly. They're listening, understanding, translating, and speaking, all at the same time. Now, for most of us, that would trigger instant cognitive overload. Your brain just isn't wired for that kind of multitasking. But the pros have developed some amazing skills to manage it, and we're going to break down some of them. Because honestly, these are skills that can help any of us think more clearly when we're under pressure. To really get how they pull this off, we first need to understand where the problem even happens. Think of it as your brain's own mental workbench. That workbench, well, that's your short-term memory. But it's not some dusty old storage shelf. No way. It's more like a high-speed, active processing hub. This is where all the new information comes flying in, and bam, instantly gets connected to everything you already know in your long-term memory. That's how we make sense of things.
And here's the catch. This whole incredibly complex process, it has to happen in a super brief window of time. We're talking just 15 to 30 seconds. That's it. That's all the time your brain has to grab, process, and use information before it just vanishes. This is exactly why interpreters have to be so ruthlessly efficient.
So what happens when they get stuck on a word inside that tiny little time frame? Well, they don't panic. They improvise, using a set of really clever word hacks.
Think of this as their verbal first aid kit. Instead of getting hung up on one single word, they just find a way around it. First, they can just describe the idea. If that doesn't feel right, they can flip it and explain what it isn't. Or they can go more general, say vehicle, if they can't think of the word sedan. And finally, they do a quick gut check. Is this word really that important? If not, they just drop it and keep the conversation moving. And this shows you just how well this works in practice. Let's say the term is civil servant. Instead of freezing, you could just say someone who works for the state. That's the description hack. Or you could try someone who doesn't work in the private sector. That's using the opposite. Either way, the meaning gets across perfectly. Problem solved. But look, those hacks are really just what you do when you're already in trouble. The real secret, the proactive, game-changing skill, is all in how interpreters listen. They don't just hear words like the rest of us. They approach listening in a totally different way. They use a technique called analytic listening. You see, most of us listen for individual words, but interpreters train themselves to listen for the big ideas and the overall structure of what's being said. It's kind of like we're all hearing the individual bricks, but they're seeing the blueprint for the entire building. Here's how it works. They're laser focused on the main idea, not every single little word. But, and this is so important, they pay hyper attention to the small words most of us tune out. Words like but, or however, or and. Why? Because those little words are the traffic signals of a conversation. They tell you exactly when the story is about to make a turn, or continue on, or double back on itself. Okay, so what about all the details that are just pure memorization? You know, names, dates, really complex numbers. You can't just get the idea of a phone number, right? Simple. They offload it. By just quickly writing those things down, they free up that precious 30-second mental workbench to focus on understanding the real message. Now, here's a technique that is just so powerful. It's not just about listening, it's about experiencing it. Interpreters actively create this rich, multi-sensory movie in their head. They visualize the scene, they hear the sounds, they even imagine the feelings involved. The more senses you use, the more the memory sticks. It's an amazing technique for anyone trying to learn something new. All right, so all of this builds to the final, and maybe the most mind-bending skill of all, how interpreters can somehow understand a word they have never, ever heard before.
This is the ultimate challenge, isn't it? This isn't a tip-of-the-tongue problem. It's a complete and total blank. Those improv hacks won't work if you don't even have a concept to describe. So what do? The first step is totally counterintuitive. They do nothing. Or rather, they don't panic. Panicking is the enemy. It just slams the door shut on your mental workbench. Instead, a good interpreter just takes a breath and keeps listening with intense focus. And this brings us to the central puzzle. How on earth can your memory, the place where you store everything you already know, possibly help you figure out a word that isn't even in there? It seems impossible.
The answer is just brilliant. The brain uses every other word in the sentence as a clue. Because you have all these strong memory connections between the words you do know, your brain can create a really detailed picture with just one blank space in it. Then it just uses logic and context to figure out what must fit in that blank. It's like a detective using all the other evidence at a crime scene to figure out the one missing piece.
So you see, these aren't just tricks for interpreters. They're powerful cognitive tools for any of us. They teach us to listen for big ideas instead of just words, to improvise calmly when we're under pressure, and to trust our own brains to solve for the unknown using context. The only question left is, how are you going to use them to upgrade your own mental agility?